Picture an animal standing on a beach, looking back at you, eye to eye. Its shoulders are level with yours. It weighs more than you do, more than almost anyone you've ever met. And it is watching you with the flat, patient stare of something that has never in its entire life had a reason to be afraid. This is a penguin, but not the one you know. The bird in your head is small and a little comical, the one that slips on the ice and waddles around in its little tuxedo. Set it aside. This one is taller than a man, heavier than a man, and it is standing on a warm green coastline under a sky that has never seen snow. And the ocean behind it, an ocean that runs to the edge of the world, holds nothing large enough to hunt it. For more than 30 million years, penguins were not a punchline. They were among the most dominant predators in the southern seas. And the story of how they got there, how enormous they became, and what finally brought them down is one of the strangest in the entire history of life. Because almost everything you picture when you hear the word, the size, the color, even the helplessness, is wrong. Start with what survived. The penguins alive today are the small ones. The largest of them, the emperor, stands a little over 3.5 feet tall and weighs about as much as a large dog. It is the biggest penguin on the planet right now, and measured against what came before it, it is modest, a scaled-down echo of something far greater. To understand what that something was, you have to go back to the single worst day in the history of the Earth. 66 million years ago, a rock the size of a city struck the planet. The dinosaurs are the most famous casualties, but the dying did not stop at the shoreline. The oceans lost their rulers too. The great marine reptiles, the long-necked hunters, and the armored sea lizards that had owned the water for over 100 million years. In a geological instant, the seas were swept clean of their top predators. And an empty throne does not stay empty. In the wreckage, something moved. On the coastlines of the south, a seabird was making a decision its descendants would never be able to undo. It was giving up the sky. Flight is expensive, and a wing built for the air is a compromise, too stiff to be efficient underwater, too fragile to push through it with any force. But in an ocean suddenly stripped of large hunters, the reward for diving had never been higher, and the price had never been lower. There was food in the cold water, and almost nothing left to fight over it. So the bird stopped flying. Its wings flattened and hardened into blades. Its bones, hollow and light, the way a flying bird's must be, filled in and turned dense and heavy, the way a diver straps on weights before going down. Within just a few million years of the asteroid, which is barely a breath in this kind of time, the first true penguins were already slipping through the southern seas. That alone is remarkable, but it is not the remarkable part. Because once it was in the water, with the whole ocean open in front of it and no rival worth the name, the penguin did the thing that life only does when nothing at all is holding it back. It started to grow. And it kept growing. We know this from bones pulled out of cliffs and sea-worn boulders on the far southern edges of the world, in New Zealand, along the coast of Peru, and on a single island off Antarctica that has surrendered more of these creatures than anywhere else on Earth. What those bones describe is close to impossible to believe. The heaviest of them tipped the scales at around 340 pounds. Sit with that number for a second. That is nearly double what the average grown man weighs. A swimming, fish-eating bird with the bulk of a full-grown gorilla. Another stretched nearly 7 feet from the tip of its beak to its tail. Standing in front of you, its head would have reached your eyes. In the cold, dark water it called home, it was a column of muscle built for a single purpose, going deeper, and staying down longer than anything else that was alive. And these were not freak individuals, one-off monsters. Giant penguins appear again and again across millions of years and thousands of miles, in different shapes and in separate family lines, as if the Southern Ocean kept arriving at the same answer over and over again. Big. The answer was always big. For now, hold on to that heaviest one, the 340-pound giant, because there is a problem with it that we're going to come back to. And it is not the problem you would expect. The world these giants ruled looks nothing like the map in your head either. We think of the Deep South as a wall of ice, the coldest, whitest, most hostile place on the planet. But for almost the entire time the giant penguins existed, it was none of that. The far south was green. Forests grew there. Rain fell instead of snow. The coastlines were mild and frost-free, closer to a cool, dripping rainforest than to the frozen desert we know today. The whole bottom of the world was warmer, softer, and far more crowded with life. So this is the stage, a warm, forested coast at the bottom of the world, fringed by a cold and fish-rich sea, with no ice anywhere in sight, and patrolling it on the land and through the water, the largest seabirds that have ever existed. The question is how they ruled it. Size by itself does not make a predator, so look closer at the skull, and the first thing that stops you is the beak. The penguins of today have short, blunt beaks for snapping up small fish. These ancient giants carried something else entirely, a long, narrow, spear-tipped weapon, in some of them nearly as long as your forearm. This was not built for nibbling. It was built for striking, for driving clean through the body of a large fish or a squid and holding it fast. There is nothing alive today that hunts quite like it. And the way they moved would be instantly familiar to anyone who has watched a penguin in the water, just scaled up into something far more powerful. They did not paddle. They flew underwater, beating those stiffened wings the way an albatross beats the air, banking and accelerating through the dark after their prey. A bigger body bought them more than reach. It let them dive deeper into water where smaller hunters could not follow, and hold their breath far longer in the freezing dark. All that bulk holding in heat the way a small body never can. To put that in perspective, even the modest survivor of today, the emperor, can drop more than 1,800 feet below the surface and stay under for over half an hour on a single breath. The giants were larger and built for exactly this. They almost certainly went further still. The bigger they were, the more of the ocean belonged to them, top to bottom, surface to seafloor. In the seas of that ancient South, almost nothing could touch them. They held the coast, the shallows, and the deep, in a world that handed them the keys and walked away. But here is where the picture you've been building in your head starts to come apart. Because if you've been imagining these giants in black and white, the crisp, formal, tuxedoed look of every penguin you have ever seen, you are wrong about that too. We can read color in fossils now. Locked inside exceptionally preserved feathers are microscopic structures that, in living animals, carry pigment, and the size and shape of those structures leave behind a fingerprint of the original color. When that fingerprint was read in one of these ancient giants, it did not come back black and white. It came back reddish-brown and gray. These animals were not the sharp monochrome we know. They were earthy and muted, the color of rust and wet stone. The crisp black and white uniform, the single most recognizable thing about a penguin, had not even been invented yet. It would arrive much later on much smaller birds. The giants were something older and stranger. And the color is not the only thing we have had to tear up and redraw. Remember that heaviest penguin, the 340-pound giant. Recently, that record came under attack, not because someone found a bigger one, but because of a quieter and far more unsettling question. Was it ever really its own kind of animal at all? A hard look at the bones suggested that the features used to crown it as a separate record-breaking species might be nothing more than ordinary variation, the kind of difference you would find between any two individuals of a single kind, the way no two people are built exactly alike. If that argument holds, then the heaviest penguin that ever lived may not be some lost giant species at all. It may simply be an unusually large member of one we had already named. That fight is not settled, and that, more honestly than any single bone, is the real state of this science right now. We are still working out what it is we are even looking at. Which leaves the hardest question. If these animals were so dominant, so large, so well-armed, so perfectly built for the southern seas, then what happened to them? Why is the biggest penguin alive today only a fraction of what once existed? The answer is that the empty ocean did not stay empty forever. For tens of millions of years, the penguin's single greatest advantage had been the absence of competition. Nothing else of any size was hunting those cold southern waters, but the ocean was slowly filling back up, and it was filling with animals that turned out to be very, very good at the exact thing the penguins did. The seals arrived, so did the early whales, and not the gentle giants that strained food from the water, but the toothed hunters, the fast and sharp-minded ancestors of the dolphins. These newcomers wanted the same fish. They dove to the same depths. In every way that mattered, they were the penguins' rivals, and some of them were large enough to treat a penguin not as a competitor, but as a meal. The pressure came from every direction at once. The newcomers took the food and the water. They took the beaches where the penguins hauled out to breed and raise their young, and wherever they could, they hunted the penguins themselves. A giant body is a magnificent thing when you are the only hunter in the sea. The moment that sea fills up with faster, smarter rivals, it turns into a burden. Slow to grow, expensive to feed, and easy to find. One by one, the giants went out. The empire did not fall to a single catastrophe or a sudden death. It was simply outcompeted, ground down over millions of years by the very kind of animal that had been missing on the day the penguins first rose. The world had finally produced something better at being a penguin than the penguins were. Almost. Because the penguins did not disappear completely. A few of them found an answer to the newcomers that the giants never could. They got small. A smaller penguin needs less food. It grows up faster. It can nest in places the big hunters cannot easily reach, on cliffs, on remote shores, on the hard frozen edges of a world that was by now finally turning to ice. As the great ones died away, these small survivors slipped through the gap, and from them came every single penguin alive today. So the next time you see one sliding on its belly across the snow, shuffling in a long comic line against the wind, understand what you are actually looking at. You are not looking at a fragile, faintly ridiculous little bird. You are looking at the heir to a lost empire. The small, clever survivor of a dynasty that once stood eye to eye with anything that walked the southern shore. In a warm green world with no ice and no rivals, back when penguins were not a punchline, back when they were kings.